Hello and welcome to this episode. This is one of the videos in our Let's Talk About series, and today we are talking about data analysis. So I've got Chris Shaw with me here. Welcome, Chris.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you for inviting me on here this morning.
No, it's my pleasure. Chris has started a new venture, which we're going to get to towards the end of this video. But beforehand, let's just talk about data analysis for a little bit. So, Chris, what has your involvement been with data analysis?
Right. Well, I've been involved with data in one form or another for almost all of my career. Usually, for a large part of it, actually just using data to analyse different parts of the service I was offering in different roles that I've had to get feedback from how the service is working and how it can be improved. And also, I spent a lot of time in designing new components and features for services in the mobile industry and others. So data informs the design of those services. So lots of different uses there. More recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've actually retrained as a data scientist. So that's actually gotten me much more deeper into data analysis, and then using data in much deeper ways, which has led me to perhaps use different types of tools and different types of approaches. But fundamentally, data analysis has been at the heart of one role or other, pretty much all of the jobs I've done through my career.
Okay, because I obviously do a lot of data analysis as well with all businesses I've worked for, and now specifically with Spreadsheet solutions. But one of the questions I get asked quite a bit, and I'm going to ask you the same question, is obviously people realize that there's a lot of data floating around, but their question to me is, why is it so important to analyze that data?
Well, really, you're quite right. I mean, there is data. There can be lots of data. There is lots of data floating around, and even small amounts of data are useful. And the reason, fundamentally, why it's important to analyze data is because data can help you to answer questions about your business. So if you don't have any questions at all about your business, then data analysis is not going to help you. But if, for example, you want to know, what were your sales last month, how many people have contacted you on your service desk, which customers are returning to use your product or service, how many people have lapsed, what are people, when you do your advertising, how people are responding to that and then taking up the product. All these kind of basic questions. Almost any business can have this type of question, and those are just entry-level questions you might have about your business. And then once you start there, you have deeper and deeper questions you want to know. So really, the whole purpose of data analysis is to answer questions that you have about your business. And if the data may not be there to answer that question, your question may not be there, in which case data analysis will reveal that, and perhaps you can go and collect the data in some other way. It will help plug your gaps. But certainly, if you don't have questions about your business, then data analysis isn't going to be of any use to you.
Well, this is another thing that I get asked as well, is because when I talk to people about data analysis, they'll very often say something along the lines of, "Oh, I don't need to do that. My business isn't big enough." But I don't really think it's got anything to do with the size of your business. As you say, it's got to do with your mindset and what, do you actually want to know about what's going on in your business? Because if you're not interested, then data analysis, as you say, is useless. But if you want to know, I mean, it doesn't really matter how big your business is, does it? If you've got the data and you want to know some answers, you need to analyze it.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And in my own, I mean, I've worked in large companies and small companies and startups, and I've got my own startup now. And my business is actually founded on data. Without data, I don't know what I'm doing next. And it's only a very small amount of data I can analyze in a single spreadsheet at the moment, and that will grow. But I can't imagine there's a business that's so small that the data that it holds can't reveal answers about decisions you need to take in that business. Even just how many customers you've got and how many customers you've got capacity to serve. If you're a single person business, you have a finite resource, and you need to know, can I take on an extra client or not? Well, the data that you hold, that you already have collected about that, may not be in the right format, and we can talk about how that might be transformed, but that data for sure will answer those questions for you. So I can't actually construct an even hypothetical scenario of a business that is so small that its data can't be used to inform decision making.
I mean, that's exactly, I mean, my business isn't particularly big. It's myself and my wife. And I'm sure you can imagine I analyze data for just about everything. And one thing that struck me, having done so, is that I've often got an idea of what I think is happening. But once I've analyzed the data, I've realized what I thought was happening actually hasn't been the case. It's specifically for marketing. I kind of, you put out some content and you think, wow, that's doing really, really well because there's so many likes and all the rest of it and comments and whatnot. But then you realize after you've done the analysis that actually other posts are getting far more clicks to your website than that one maybe was. And then you realize where the value lies. And often, analyzing data can show you things that sometimes it shows you what you expect. Sometimes it actually shows you things that you never would have thought of beforehand. And I think that's where the value lies in analyzing it.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the and that is actually the biggest challenge that data scientists have in their day-to-day work. In fact, looking at things at the macro level, because everybody has an intuition about their own business, and intuitions are very important. And your gut feel for who your customers are and how they come and find you and so on is that that is an art, not a science, and that you definitely need that. But actually, when you bring in the data and start to look at it from your business, it can actually reveal aspects that are just beyond your gut instinct, and you use the data to enhance that and improve your instincts about your business. If you just rely on what you observe through your own eyes and your own personal experience, you will for sure have a deep knowledge of your business. But if you start to look at some of the data that you can't see in your eyes, like how many posts, how many likes did a particular post get, or what was the response, or what was the conversion rate on a particular activity, then you can actually use that other data to actually inform your instinctive feel for the business. So I think they're complementary.
Exactly. What we obviously spoken a little bit about Excel, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But what other tools do you use to analyze data?
Well, yeah. So I mean, Excel and its predecessors in the very early years of analysis have been the staple for me. I would say that since I've trained more formally in the data science, there are much more powerful tools for when you get deeper ways to analyze data, and that really, you can go a long way with Excel, but sometimes your data is just too big to fit into memory, or there's deeper relationships you want to explore. And for those, there are a couple of tools which I think are in the box of every data analyst and data scientist that when you start going beyond there. One of them is Python, and its set of tools there, programming language, and another one is R and R Studio, which is another programming language, but it specializes in kind of data analysis and statistics. So those are two tools which might look a bit scary as a level up from Excel when you first look at it, but actually when you first start doing it, it isn't actually any more than writing formulas in Excel. Really, there's a slightly different syntax, but you can translate Excel formulas into R actually quite straightforwardly and do that, and then you get access to it. Once you're in that language, you can have access to some much more powerful modeling and analysis tools if you want to build on there. But certainly I would, and the way in which all of those tools work use the concept of a data frame. And a data frame is simply what you imagine it would be from an Excel sheet. It's rows and columns of tabular data, which you can then transform in all sorts of different ways. But really, the unit of currency in both of those tools, Python, Pandas, and R, is the data frame, which in essence is a spreadsheet, and then you can add things to that. So really, the transitioning from one to the other is not really as scary as it might sound when you first kind of look at a Python script and think, oh, that looks a bit mysterious to me.
I mean, I found often the other way around. I think I've had a few people approach me to do, well, not approach me, they've been told to approach me by someone, and they've been skeptical about it because they didn't think that Excel could handle their data. Now, you're absolutely right. There are times when I look at data sets and I say to people, Excel, it can't do what you want with that much data. There is definitely a limit, and I'm the first person to admit that. But I find people would come to me with 2,000 rows of data saying we don't think Excel can handle this, and I'm going, well, what are you talking about? It's going to eat this for breakfast. So people kind of often tend to underestimate what Excel can do. But I mean, as you've touched on before, and that would be my next question. I mean, I obviously use Excel a lot to analyze data. You've mentioned using it as well. There's obviously still a huge market, especially from smaller businesses who maybe aren't collecting so much data. There's still a huge market for spreadsheets to analyze data, isn't there?
For sure. I mean, Excel still is the dominating tool for all data analysis in companies all over the world, and it's not going away. And everybody's experience, anyone who's done any data analysis has that experience in Excel for doing it. 2,000 rows, 4,000 rows, 10,000 rows is all very doable within Excel with the spec of PCs these days. The key thing really is as your data does get organized, it's not so much the analysis, because the tools inside Excel like pivot tables and formulas and conditionals, summations, and all the tools that are in Excel can answer an awful lot of questions that you have about your business. So you can go a long way with actually analysing it. And it's not until you get to some really deep questions you need to go to some other tools. So the main thing really I would say in Excel is to actually be clear about the management of the data of the exported data in the spreadsheet, rather than what is the limitations of the analysis, because you won't find with the plotting tools and the pivot tables and everything else, you won't really find too many limitations for a lot of your questions. But you might find, unless you actually be very clear about how you manage your exported data in that Excel sheet, and be clear that you haven't got duplicates, and a lot of problems with data analysis is dirty in, dirty out. So actually the focus isn't so much on the capabilities of the analysis itself, because I think those are robust in Excel. There's a lot of work gone into that. It's about how you approach data management in your business, and make sure that you're actually putting very clean and tidy data in before you start your analysis, and then you can trust the results coming out. Well, that also applies for the other tools as well. To be honest, that doesn't go away when you have other tools, but it definitely applies. You can't leverage the benefits of Excel without having good data management practices.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, whether I'm making a spreadsheet in Excel or whether you're making something in Python or something different, the capabilities of the tools come down to our skills and what we can actually achieve. But the user who's using it at the end, as you say, I had one situation where I did a tool for someone and they came back saying, why are all these values showing 0? And I said, well, let's have a look at your raw data. Well, there you go. There was a glitch on the computer at that particular point collecting their data, and it was showing all zeros. And if you're going to put, if the data you're putting in isn't right, the spreadsheet can be as brilliant as you want, or whatever it is you're using can be as brilliant as you want. It's still going to show you what your numbers say. So you're right. It's absolutely about keeping that data clean.
Yeah. There's an adage in data science which says that 80% of a data scientist's job is cleaning data, and 20% of the job is complaining about cleaning data. So really, I mean, there is and there's kind of a lot in that as well. But yeah, I mean, doing engineering on your data is actually where most of the hard work lies. Doing analysis itself is actually fairly repeatable and fairly once you've got it set up, it's actually quite straightforward to do. But getting that data right in the first place is where your initial efforts are.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Here's a difficult question for you. I'm not sure how I would answer this one, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. There's so much data available out there, especially to business owners. Where would you suggest someone start if they're not doing any data analysis?
Well, building on what we've said so far, if you're not doing any data analysis at all, assuming that you have data in some form, the first place to start is really to ask, what kind of questions do you have about your business? Because if you start trying to analyze data without really knowing what the question is, you're probably not going to go very far, or worse, you're going to reach an answer to a question you didn't know you had, and then you're going to follow that and hope that gives you some insight. So really everything comes back down to the question. So if you haven't done any analysis, and I can't really believe that, although it might not have been done formally in a spreadsheet, that someone hasn't done any data analysis. So for example, most people know how much money they made last month, or they know how many customers they've got. So they've already got some basic data analysis they've done in their head. So if they haven't done this on any kind of formal way and they want to start exploring that, then I think the first question is just to work out all those key metrics for their business that are important to them, which might be costs, sales, number of customers, hours worked, whatever the number of heads cut if you're a hairdresser or whatever, whatever is important for your business, is to actually get all of those, write them down first, to be clear, because it takes a few goes to write down a question, and then look around at your data. Your data may not be in a suitable format to start with. It might be in the form of invoices, it might be in Word documents or whatever. Some of it might be already in various different spreadsheets. Then start to just tabulate your data together that you think might be useful for answering those questions. Tabulate that together, put that into one place, which is starting to clean and tidy your data, as we talked about before. And then some very simple tools you can learn or look online for doing things that will. The thing that I think a few years ago that powered me in my journey through spreadsheets was I first used a spreadsheet in let me think now, 1990. I used Lotus 123, and I've been using them, and I became a power user in 1990. So I started to learn everything then. But it wasn't really until maybe 10 years later or so that I actually did my first pivot table, which is just a way of turning your data in on itself, so you can actually view that data from a completely different perspective. A lot of people think that pivot tables are a bit mysterious and they can look a bit odd when you first use them, but even something like that, once you've got your data in a nice tabular format, just running a simple pivot on it by time or some other category of your business or whatever else will actually show you a different way of summarizing your data. And that's the aha moment. That was the aha moment for me, that suddenly data analysis is powerful, because you can take hundreds or thousands of rows of data and suddenly summarize them into 3 or 4 different metrics, and suddenly see something different that you hadn't seen just by staring at the individual rows. So if you haven't ever done any data analysis before, I would start with a question, gather the data together that you think might answer that, and then start to just do some very simple functions on Excel and see if those then answer the questions you have. And from there, it can snowball out. It can snowball to whatever depth of question and model you want to build up.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny, because people often ask me if I do pivot tables, and I had someone ask me, it was probably about 6 months ago, they called me and said, a friend of mine called me and said, can you show me how to do a pivot table? Because they had a job interview that asked them to do it. And I said to them, to be honest with you, I need to look it up. I haven't done a pivot table in about 4 years, because I actually write formulas to do what the pivot tables do. Because I'm creating tools for clients, it's all locked down. I don't actually use pivot tables. And it's interesting that so many people use them, because I know what they do and I know the power behind them and why people use them. But I just do the same thing using formulas. And when people ask me to do pivot tables, I've forgotten how to do it. It's been so long since I've actually done one.
Exactly, but that really shows you the power of Excel. I mean, and there's important things which we'll probably get onto about why, once you know what the analysis is you want to do, why it needs to be locked down and repeatable in the way you suggest using formulas, which is a bit more involved and complex. But if someone wants to just get started, a pivot table is a great tool inside Excel that can actually reveal secrets from your data for free. Really, the effort of learning it and the insights you get is a big leap forward. And then you can actually start to specify to yourself or other people who's going to actually build something more robust. You actually have a lot more confidence in what you want then, because you've now explored your data in different ways. So I think pivot tables are a great way for exploratory data analysis, and they work out the box for most situations. But yeah, you wouldn't use them in a tool, so to speak, because they're kind of a bit throwaway pivot tables once you've made one.
Yeah, and a bit volatile as well if you're trying to replace the data all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, but if you're doing what I would call ad hoc analysis,
yes, definitely.
Then pivot table is. I would, if you're doing an ad hoc analysis and you're not using pivot table, I'd question what you think you're actually doing, because that should be your first port of call. Doing that and making a plot is the other thing. If plotting your data is immensely powerful. There's obviously a lot of charting capabilities in Excel as well.
But I'm glad that you mentioned about the whole question first as to what you want to achieve, because I was talking to someone yesterday on one of the Facebook business groups that I'm in, and they were saying that they use a spreadsheet to keep track of all of their jobs. So they're getting different sales in from different platforms for various products, and they were plotting, they were kind of capturing all of this data, but only while the job was live. Once the job was done, they were then clearing the data and adding another job on. So they kind of had this rolling lot of data, and the data they were capturing was quite useful to be analyzed afterwards, because I said to them, why are you throwing that data away? Why not collect it?
Yeah.
Even if you take it off one spreadsheet, you can put it onto another one where you can actually store the data, because they were capturing all sorts of dates, what products, what prices, which platforms. And I said that can produce a massive, well, it could produce a lot of information for them as far as where their sales are coming from, when, and what products. But they just didn't seem interested. And at the end of the day, you can have all the tools you want. The first step is that drive to want to know what's actually happening. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short.
I agree, and and people, and that would be what you're describing there is the difference between kind of operational data and warehouse data, to sort of give it a theoretical underpinning. So operational data is what you need to do your day-to-day business, and that's all you really care about, and that's really optimized for delivery of service to the customer, to allow you to deliver as efficiently as possible and the customer to consume it. However, operational data is not usually, sometimes it is, but it's not usually in the right format for analysis anyway, because it's optimized for delivering the service. So what you find is that you have to usually put your data in a different type of format if you want to ask deeper questions of it. So having an idea of your questions before you start looking at the data is why that's so important, because you can then take your data, your operational data elsewhere, store it, and then reformat it and re-clean it to answer these other questions. So it is, it's an important thing, and it's easy to miss, because actually operational data is the thing that puts your bread on the table. So that's why people focus on it, and having the processes around that as soon as possible. But the value that will grow your business is by looking at that historic performance and having informed decisions about your future operations. I think that's where the nub of doing that is. There's also an interesting concept which I like to explore, which is related to that, but slightly different, in the concept of what I call data exhaust. So data exhaust is data you get that is a byproduct of another process. Typically, it might be a log file or something on a website that you've got, and you have that in order to spot errors and the service and so on. So a lot of services and businesses keep log files. Well, actually, if you take your log files and analyze them in offline, you can actually reveal a lot more insight about your business and behaviors than you'd ever even intended that log file to capture. So even data that you're capturing for one purpose, to serve one part of your business, can actually be turned into insights that are really valuable in another part of your business down the line. So my mantra would be never throw away your data, even if it looks, even if it doesn't look that useful, because you will find a use for it somewhere down the line as you get more sophisticated with data analysis.
I mean, one thing I started analyzing, which I never thought would even be a thing, but it's actually proved extremely useful, is the downloads from my website. You upload all these downloads, and I've got all sorts of PDF brochures or free product trials or free personal. When I say personal products, I'm talking about spreadsheets people would use in the personal capacity rather than the business capacity, or free business downloads. And I've categorized all the different downloads, and actually that download log, to download that and analyze it and actually say, well, actually, this kind of spreadsheet, I've only got 5% of the downloads fall into that category, but that proves to be 25% of the actual downloads. It just shows how popular certain ones are. Yeah. And that's really helped me to then change and go, well, actually, I thought people were after free spreadsheets, but actually they're more after the PDF brochures explaining the spreadsheets. And it's been a massive learning curve to actually see what's actually happening rather than what I think people are after. And as you say, a lot of this data is lying around somewhere. It's just a case of getting hold of it and actually using it.
Exactly. I mean, that's a great example, and perhaps one that you can use as a case study on your own website as well for what you've used. I mean, you're a retailer, And retailers, they track footfall of who's coming into their shop, which is the website visitors. You also want to track data about whose products you're taking, which is stock taking, which products are coming off your shelves, whether is it the brochure, is it the spreadsheet, which people are then interacting, leaving comments or further inquiries and so on. I mean, it's retail, and there's a lot of analysis gone in over the last couple of centuries about what retailers need to know about their customers in order to have a successful business, and digital is no different. So all these sources of data, I'm not surprised that they're giving you insights into what your customers want, rather than you have to dream what it is.
Now earlier you mentioned about reanalyzing data, and that's one thing I obviously do. I don't take people's data, analyze it, and give them the result. I actually make the tools so that they can use it over and over again, because that's massively important, isn't it? You can't just analyze data once and there's your answer. It's a regular occurrence. So having a tool that you can just dump your data in and see the result is extremely useful.
I mean, I think that's what I would call a product at the end, which actually is going to drive your day-to-day decision making and grow your business. So generally speaking, data science or data analysis is a pipeline. You start off with your question, you then do some exploratory analysis or ad hoc analysis to try and do around that question. You then come to some kind of conclusion on that, and usually the conclusion, you want to then monitor that conclusion and make sure that still holds over time, but also then add further insight to that. So really we've talked earlier on about pivot tables and getting your data in the right format and that kind of thing, which are the early parts of the pipeline. And there's benefit in those being very ad hoc, because you're not investing a lot of time in that. You're going very quickly around all the data you've got. But once you start to know, actually, no, these are the questions I want answered, and this is the format I want them in, and these are the questions I actually want to know, you start to get to the realm of kind of dashboards and products, really, which is the other end of the pipeline. And then what's important is, first of all, that those are reliable and built properly, so there isn't a bug in the formula, and they're well tested, that you can actually rely on the dashboard because you're going to be making decisions on it. But then also, we've talked about the data management of putting that in. You have to have some really formal way of taking your exported data from your systems and loading it into the spreadsheet so that it can give you repeatable results. You don't want it to suddenly have duplicated your lines somewhere and suddenly you think the sales have gone in a different direction. So I think having that, the whole journey, if you have your data analysis, if you only have your data analysis ending at exploratory and ad hoc, you may get some one-time conclusion, but very quickly, 1 month later, 6 months later, it's going to be probably invalid because everything's moved on. So it might provide you some very short-term boost for your business, but really, once you've got that and you can actually see the insights, it's well worth, I think, getting to productize that analysis so that you can then repeat it. And reproducibility and repeatability are also important aspects of data science and data analysis. In fact, in my opinion, the cornerstones of it. If you haven't got something that's reproducible, then you haven't really got anything that's reliable, and therefore you've not really got anywhere. So for me, that's where that product really comes into its own, is when you know what your questions are, you know where your data is, and you want to quickly and reliably update your position every week, month, or whatever your period of concern is.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. We're almost out of time. I do have one other question that I want to ask you. I feel slightly involved in this, even though I've had nothing to do with it, because I watched it all unfold on LinkedIn. But tell us about Meet My Mentor. How did that come about, and what is it?
Yeah, well, that's an exciting journey for myself and my co-founder Tiffany in the last couple of weeks. So it really came about from some work I've been doing with. I met Tiff by chance on LinkedIn a few months ago. She was looking for someone to help with Python. Actually, her daughter was starting to learn Python, and so I had a bit of time and thought I would be interested to. That's the kind of thing I'm interested in, help young people. And really, it just exploded from there. Really, there was so much interest in this story as it evolved. Tiff was writing posts on LinkedIn, and there was more and more interest. That really, it just exploded and became apparent to both of us that really, lots and lots of people, you and I, and lots of people like us have got a lot of experience in things that we want, and we want to help we want to help the next generation and other generations to actually go on this journey themselves and do that. And there was really no natural place for all the mentoring programs and all the various tools that exist, lots and lots of good things all over the place. There wasn't really a really simple digital way to do this. So we founded Meet My Mentor recently to really explore, to first of all bring a community together that was on LinkedIn and is now forming in our separate community platform. And we've just this morning started our first project. We've had about 100 sign-ups so far, a mix between people who are offering some skills and people who are looking for some skills. So we started our first project this morning, which, believe it or not, so it's very early days. We are looking to, and what we're looking to do is to explore ways in which we can deliver mentoring in a much more simple and engaging way than trying to sign up to a one-to-one session and meet for a coffee and trying to go down that whole kind of route of traditional mentoring programs. We want it just to be very fun, quick, easy, and engaging, really. So it's been a great journey so far, and that's where we're going to take it. So yes, and you have been very involved, as have others, but by just contributing and building this community that started on LinkedIn and is still taking place on LinkedIn. And we've now got a little home that's a little bit temporary at the moment, but we're going to be moving that onto a community platform quite soon, where we can then build that and really bring these people together who are really passionate about the areas they work in and really want to spread that knowledge and try and give them a platform they can do that.
I first saw a post just by some Tiffany saying, thanks Chris for teaching my daughter some Python. Here's some code that she did. Yes. And then next thing, it just kind of exploded. And then I see you've got a website up and it's all happening. So yeah, I think that's obviously something great to be able to do, especially because I think a lot of people have learned their skills not necessarily going to university or whatever, but you learn your skills through actually doing it and just teaching. Some people even teach themselves. A lot of my Excel stuff was all self-taught, and actually to be able to, as a young person, to be able to get together with someone who's got that experience just to kind of get you started is absolutely invaluable.
I think so, and that's the core of what we're trying to do. Really, is just to connect those people together in a way that is convenient. That it isn't put upon. People don't feel that both parties are getting something from the relationship or the dialogue in that way. Really, so that's what we want to explore. And yes, that post you refer to I think has got 600,000 views so far, and that was what really prompted it. And what's great about the world we live in today, you can just bring people together very quickly. You can put up a website very quickly, and you can start. And again, coming back to the theme of data, I could still be, if we hadn't put that website together and launched that business, I would still be sat here today in my room on my own, writing a Word document to myself about this theory of mentoring, right? And that's all it would be. Yeah. But by using some very simple tools that we've put out there, we've now got 20 people in our community. I've got 90 people in the list waiting to join. We've got some projects underway. I've got some data that's come back already on what people want, to your point earlier on. So I now know that rather than trying to dream it up. I've had some great interactions with people in California who have done something similar. I've got some product ideas to do there. So by actually taking action, it's actually bred action, and it's just a great example, I think, of how you can use this digital world to try out ideas and see what happens. So this is a very exciting journey for us, very very early stage, but we're looking forward to see how this evolves over the next weeks and months.
Well, Chris, yeah, I think that's all we've got time for. So thank you very much for coming on and chatting to me today. And I wish you all the best with Meet My Mentor.
Great, thank you very much, Richard. It's been a pleasure today to talk about data analysis, and is a topic I'm very passionate about. So I'm hoping that your business can help people get control of their data too.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks.